everyone to our monthly mental health ministry conversation. Um, Ask everybody, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, if you could go ahead and share the post. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us for our monthly mental health ministry conversation. And if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, if you could go ahead and share the post, I would be extremely, extremely appreciative. All right. Our topic for today is drug use and mental health. Drug use and mental health. Okay. All right. Our topic is drug use and mental health. Again, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, please go ahead and share the post. And our presenter is coming on at any minute. All right, she's coming on now because you definitely don't want me to lead the conversation. I have everybody lost. All right, again, the conversation is that we're talking about today is drug use and mental health, a discussion of comorbidity. All
Mhm.
right, and if Trina has made it in and she's prepared, we'll go ahead and introduce one of the co-coordinators of our mental health ministry, Katrina Rawls Hernandez.
All right, thank you, Pastor. Sorry, I was trying to get everything together.
No
Um,
problem.
Good to be here tonight. So yes, as Pastor Ross said, we're going to be talking about drug use and mental health, how that comorbidity. We're going to talk about what comorbidity is and how that works together with those two issues. You can start with the next slide.
All right.
All right, so the definition of comorbidity. Can you hear me, Pastor? Okay.
Yes.
Comorbidity is a medical term. It describes the existence of more than one disease or condition within the body at the same time. Comorbidities are usually long-term or they're chronic, which means that they really cause bad problems. They're not something that kind of comes and goes away. You usually have them for life, and you're usually working with different health specialists to get just to kind of cope through life with these issues. They may or may not interact with each other. In the context of mental health, comorbidity often refers to disorders that are often coexistent with each other, such as depression and anxiety disorders. So we have just a quick video. I found this very intelligent Black man works in mental health, and he talks about co-occurring or more comorbid disorders and just what they look like. And like I'm telling you about it, but he kind of gives you more examples.
What in the world is a co-occurring diagnosis, aka a dual diagnosis? Well, according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the coexistence of both a mental health and substance use disorder is referred to as a co-occurring disorder. If that definition only causes even more confusion, no worries. In this video, I'm going to be talking about why mental illnesses and substance use tend to happen together, even go into some common mental health conditions, so that way you know you're not alone in facing some of these symptoms, and share some healthy, actionable steps that you or someone else that you know can take right now that will help you begin improving right away. My name is Emmanuel with Sandstone Care, and here we provide substance abuse, addiction, and mental health treatment. More about who we are and what we do at the end. Let's get into the video. Why at most times do mental illnesses and substance use tend to go hand in hand? The best place to start is to think about how people cope when a negative challenge or new mental obstacle comes up. When a negative or challenging situation comes up, do you, your friend, or your loved one respond by coping with exercise or maybe processing emotions through art, music, crafting, talking to others about how you feel, or spending time with friends and family? If so, these would be some healthy coping methods and positive ways to deal with mental and emotional challenges. But on the other hand, in terms of co-occurring disorders and dual diagnosis, When a similar challenge comes up, that person would choose to self-medicate and feel better with the use of a substance of some sort. This could be substances like marijuana, alcohol, stimulants, uppers, and more. The thing about coping this way though, is that by using a substance, the need to use that substance to feel better over time increases. This normally only temporarily solves the problem or progressively makes things worse. Substances don't help to build positive, healthy coping mechanisms nearly as much as exercise, journaling, and other positive mechanisms I mentioned earlier do. So when it comes to knowing what a dual diagnosis or what a co-occurring disorder is, understand that there is a connection between coping with negative and challenging situations with the use or abuse of a substance, as I just mentioned a moment ago, and mental illnesses. Now that you understand a dual diagnosis is a connection between substance use and someone's mental condition, in this next section of the video, I'm going to be breaking down 5 of the most common mental disorders that normally co-occur with the dual diagnosis. The first I'll be talking about is ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. ADHD is a mental condition where the person affected struggles with the ability to sit still. You might find it difficult to keep attention, or you become easily distracted. Some other symptoms also include being impulsive or hyperactive. So this means you are feeling this constant sense of restlessness or feel like you're becoming more quickly bored with anything. Common substances that co-occur with ADHD are stimulants. These stimulants normally contribute to anxiety, and people with this disorder typically use these stimulants to either support their own focus or self-medicate. And just a quick reminder before moving on to these other mental conditions, self-medicating again does not typically solve the root of the problem. It only temporarily fixes it without providing a long-term solution. The next mental condition I'm going to talk about is depression. Some of the symptoms of depression include feeling sad, irritable, having this constant feeling of emptiness or numbness, or even losing the feeling of excitement or pleasure during activities. Sometimes depression can be situational, like if you lost a close loved one or someone that you're close to, or if you're going through a huge transition in your life. And other times, family genetics can actually play a role in how much you're being affected by depression. In terms of depression and substances that are normally used, things like alcohol, marijuana, and stimulants like coffee or even cocaine are typically used. Next, anxiety disorders. Under this category, I'm more specifically talking about panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, social anxiety, and phobias. These anxiety disorders can be characterized by having this constant excessive worry and anxiousness. This means that because you're constantly feeling this sense of worry, you struggle and have a difficult time relaxing and settling down. The substances that normally co-occur with anxiety disorders are depressants. Some examples of these depressants are things such as alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drugs. Next up, bipolar disorders. Bipolar disorders, which previously was actually referred to as manic depressive disorder, is characterized by large swings between depression and mania. So with this mental disorder, you're experiencing the symptoms from the lows of depression, as well as having certain periods where you're actually feeling like you have a super high amount of energy, lots of excitement, or even a sense of feeling of euphoria for an extended amount of time. When it comes to understanding the substances that normally co-occur with bipolar disorder, it is more difficult to say what substances are used because you're experiencing both emotional lows and highs. Either way, the substances that are used to self-medicate and try to help typically heighten or increase the symptoms, which again does not provide that long-term solution. Instead, it only prolongs or temporarily fixes the problem. Last but not least of the mental conditions I'm going to talk about is personality disorder. Under this category, I'm more specifically talking about narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Many people with these disorders have an internal thought or behavior pattern that keeps them from relating to others. People diagnosed with this often lack a coherent sense of self, which makes it more difficult for the individual to understand and respond to others emotionally, or even relate to other people's experiences altogether. Substances that normally co-occur with personality disorders are things that soothe and numb the feelings. This could be things like alcohol and prescription drugs. It's important to note that these mental disorders, along with the combination of substance abuse, if this goes left unchecked or unresolved, the person that's self-medicating may never learn or gain the ability of knowing how to healthily cope during times of mental and emotional stress. If you are struggling yourself with any of the symptoms that I mentioned in this video, or if you want to talk to a real person and dive deeper into understanding dual diagnosis, but don't know where to go, no worries. That is why Sandstone Care is here to help. Here, you can contact a...
So any questions before I move on? I think a lot of the things that he said there, as you can see with different types of mental health disorders, there are actual drugs that make those people feel like they're feeling better, but really it can just make things worse. Any questions?
Is he saying that using substances should not be a long-term approach?
So it should not be any approach at all. Like
Okay.
you should never use any type of drugs without a doctor's orders to try to get rid of like feelings that you have. And what people do, like he said, with like personality disorder, people know that they are not able to relate with people, they're having issues, they're all... So what do? They go home, they drink, they get drunk, and the alcohol is their self-medication. And we'll talk more about self-medicating, but those are the type of things. So not like doctor prescribed medicines. These are like street drugs that the people with mental illnesses are taking in order to try to make themselves feel better.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so what does the data say about the issue? Data shows high rates of comorbid substance use disorders and anxiety disorders, which includes, like you said, general anxiety, panic, post-traumatic stress, all those things that the substance use disorders, or like people who use drugs, that's what the substance use disorder is, also have co-occurring at a high prevalence. Hold on, I got the dog. Sydney, get the dog. At a high prevalence with mental disorders. Let him out. Such as depression, bipolar, he talks about the ADHD, any kind of psychotic illness, borderline personality, and antisocial personality disorders. And then patients with schizophrenia also have higher rates of alcohol, tobacco, and drug use disorders than the general population. So it just kind of depends on what the mental illness that you're struggling with. Like if you're depressed, then you're going to want uppers. If you're feeling like the manic of the bipolar, then some people add to that to just make it even more of a great feeling, but you can only stay up so long until you crash. So that's what happens with those. Next. Yep. So data from a large nationally representative sample, it suggests that people with mental, personality, and substance use disorders were at an increased risk for non-medical use of prescription opiates. So Pastor Rawls, when you talked about like the opioid crisis, all of a sudden it's a crisis, it's an epidemic, because certain people are affected by it. Those are the types of things that they're talking about. People who are self-medicating, usually because they have some type of mental health issue, breaking into Walgreens, stealing, opioids, trying to get painkillers to self-medicate. Research indicates that 43% of people in substance use that have substance use issues, treatment for non-medical use of a prescription painkiller has a diagnosis or a symptom of mental health disorders, and it's particularly depression and anxiety. So 43% of people who use drugs also have a mental health disorder from this national sample that they ask when they ask people. So some common risk factors, there's genetic vulnerabilities. So you might have, an uncle, an aunt, a bloodline that could affect you that makes you more vulnerable to being an alcoholic, more vulnerable to using drugs, more vulnerable to take these risky or make these risky behaviors in your life. So genetics plays a part. There's also brain region involvement. So things in the brain are not working properly. And so those things are causing issues for substance abuse and mental illness. There's environmental influences. So if you live in a place where it's not safe, you're constantly looking over your shoulder. You don't have food all the time. Like that's a risk factor that can be an environmental influence. Stress, that could be stress from work, from family, from friends, from whatever stress you have. That's a risk factor. And then trauma and the adverse child experiences. I don't know if everybody was on here last time when Dr. Gillis talked about we talked about the adverse childhood experiences where things that happened to you when you were younger, if they go unresolved, they follow you into your adulthood. And these are risk factors that cause mental illness and issues with substance abuse. Okay, so causality, which comes first? Is it the substance abuse first, or is it the mental health issue first? Something that I thought about and I looked up. So the high prevalence morbidity between substance use disorders and other mental illnesses does not necessarily mean that one caused the other, even if it appeared first. So establishing causality or what happened, where did this come from, is difficult for several reasons. So for example, behavioral or emotional problems may not be severe enough for a diagnosis, but the subclinical mental health issues may prompt drug use. So also people, like, they don't remember which came first. They don't remember if they had the mental health issues first or if they started the drug use first because they have so many other issues. So that keeps people from not really knowing which comes first, which if one causes the other. So we talked about, or we heard about in the video about self-medicating. So self-medicating is when you giving yourself medications, even if they're like prescription medications, if they're street drugs, alcohol, but you're doing it yourself. You're not consulting a doctor. You're just deciding, I don't feel good. I don't know what's wrong with me, but maybe I'll just use, some drugs or some alcohol to try to make myself feel better. So self-medicating is a behavior in which someone uses drugs, alcohol, or other substances to treat an illness or symptoms without consulting a doctor. Self-medicating can be a way of coping with physical or psychological distress, but it can also be harmful and lead to addiction or misuse. So you may feel like, oh, I don't feel so good, so I'm gonna just, take these opioids and that makes me feel better. But, it's not a long-term use or a long-term goal that someone should have in trying to treat any type of mental health issue. Self-medicating can involve using drugs outside the license or off labels, or using medications for mental health conditions that have not been diagnosed or treated by a doctor. So you have a friend, they have some Xanax, they tell you, oh, take this Xanax, it'll help you relax. It's not your prescription. You haven't talked to a doctor. You don't know if that's going to interfere with anything else that's going on in your body, but you're taking it, and that can cause problems.
So even though it's not a drug, but would like cigarette smoking or vaping also be considered like a coping mechanism for something
Absolutely.
else?
Absolutely. So it also talked about tobacco. I didn't add that in here, but tobacco is also something like chain smoking. And the vapes, they don't even have a way of monitoring how much these people are getting when they're vaping. So the levels of nicotine or THC or whatever they're vaping through this device is like several times higher than what you would get from just smoking marijuana or smoking a cigarette. So absolutely, that would be those would be parts of self-medicating as well.
So you probably don't have the answer to this right here, but um, I would wonder if I mean because a lot of teenagers vape, and I would wonder if it's just for recreational purposes, kind of peer pressure and kind of doing what everybody else does, or are they, or is it is a large amount doing it because of stress, some types of
So
coping mechanism.
absolutely, because mental health issues usually start showing up in adolescence and middle school and high school is when mental health starts showing up. People don't really like more of our parents I see in the school system are taking it more seriously, but a lot of them are telling the kids, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, stop acting like that. And so it usually goes into adulthood unchecked. And then either as an adult, these kids will get help, or as an adult, they will start using alcohol and drugs to self-medicate. So absolutely, they're using sometimes, Bobby walked by, he said to be cool, um, but also as coping mechanisms. They have stress at home, um, their living situation they're not happy with, and so they start doing these things. I have to tell you, like right before our spring break this past week, I'm pretty sure we probably had about 5 or 6 kids that we caught with vapes, some with THC in the vapes, some with nicotine in the vapes, and they are just a lot of it are their followers, but there's also adolescences where mental illness starts, and so they can be using that as coping behaviors as well. Any other questions? That was a good question. Okay. So certain mental disorders are established risk factors for developing a substance use disorder or substance abuse. It's commonly hypothesized that individuals with severe, mild, or even subclinical mental disorders may use drugs as a form of self-medication. Although some drugs may temporarily reduce the symptoms of mental illness, so they feel like they're feeling better. I feel much better when I drink alcohol. I feel much better when I'm using this vape with THC in it. I feel much better when I'm using these opioids, but then they get that temporary reducing symptoms of a mental illness, but then it can also exasperate or make things worse. So both acutely and in the long run. So for example, the evidence suggests that periods of cocaine use may worsen the symptoms of bipolar disorder and contribute to the progression of the illness. So somebody might say, oh, when I'm feeling depressed, I'll use a little cocaine. And so that helped me come up. So that's an upper. And makes the disorder itself worse in the long run. Okay, when an individual develops a mental illness, associated changes in the brain activity increase, the vulnerability of problematic use of substances by enhancing the rewarding effects. So the brain is feeling this good, 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 and you wonder why people can't just take the drug and be done with it. It's because now the brain is like, you'll never get that first really good feeling. So they're always chasing that next high. And as soon as they come down, they want to go find the drugs to get that next high problems that they're feeling. Um, Also with like any kind of unpleasant symptoms of the mental health disorder that they have, the side effects of these medications are, causing problems as well. So for example, neuroimaging, when they're looking at the brain, It suggests that ADHD is associated with neurobiological changes in the brain circuits that are also associated with drug cravings. So when they have the ADHD, they also have drug cravings in their neurological systems in their brain. It's perhaps partially explaining why patients with substance use disorders report greater cravings when they have a comorbidity of ADHD. So it just like it affects you psychologically, it affects your brain, it affects your entire system. And people think that they're doing themselves a favor by taking these drugs, feeling better. But then as they come down from the drug, then they're constantly having to reuse in order to get back to that feeling of either numbness or the uppers when you're feeling depressed, or alcohol is a downer, and so they're drinking alcohol to kind of relax themselves. So it just kind of turns into a cycle that's just like never ending.
So on the ADHD, when that one is just so tough when it's dealing with kids. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Before I started a school several years ago, over 12 years ago, I was completely against it. And then when I started the school, I got an appreciation for it
Mm-hmm.
because one child could stop a whole class from
Mm-hmm.
learning.
Yep.
But it's not the child that the medicine is being the medicine is really being used for the classroom
As
and
a
the
pacifier.
and the adults, so that
Yeah.
they can teach the rest of the class. And so, I'm wondering, does it, even though it brings control in the classroom, um, but the child is really kind of out of it, and but they're not disrupting the classroom, but at the same time, they're a little hazy, and maybe not completely learning, but then when they're acting up, they're not learning either. And so I think
Right.
that's just a real funny place for when you're dealing with behavior issues, but you're applying the fix on a third party, trying to create an environment in a classroom, and I'm wondering if it's damaging the child.
Right. So the earlier medicines like Ritalin, things like that, they were having a lot of issues with that were just really shutting the child down. They do have better medicines now. And as I talk to parents and I talk to students, it does help them focus better. But then you really have to stay on top. As soon as the student gains some weight, now the medicine not working. Now you got to go back to the doctor. Now you got to, up the medicine, do whatever, and so the parent having to get off work and, keep all those appointments kind of makes it hard for them. But um, I have heard many parents and students say it really helps, like the new medicines that they do have out. But definitely in the beginning, it was just a pacifier to sit them down, to make them quiet. And then a lot of the kids won't take it. Like there's one of the young Black boys that was at school with us. He recently got into some trouble and was sent to alternative school, but he just the mom said he was doing so well on it, but he was like, I did not like the way it was making me feel. He was like, I felt like a robot. Like he just really couldn't function as himself. It was helping him focus, but maybe, that was something that the doctor needed to work with that prescription. It was maybe a little bit too strong, but like that just totally threw the child off. And he was like, I didn't like the way it made me feel. And so I prefer to be out here running wild, getting in trouble, being sent off, rather than taking the meds. So it's a very fine line that I've heard some success stories, but I've also heard, the kids say it takes away their personality. The parents say it takes away the kids' personality, and they're just not the same kid. They're not the same student.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I can kind of relate to it, even though I feel that the medication helps, but just being the person that's being affected by it, it's I guess it just really is on how a person is wired. But like even if I have to be given some kind of pain medication for something from a surgery or something like that, I it's a lot of times I'll just based on the intensity of the pain, I'll just try to deal with the pain, because of you know the how the medicine might make you feel, just kind of take you out and kind of make you nauseous and all that kind of stuff. And I guess some people can, like even me, I can't even handle that little thing they put you inside to this little thing they put you inside to, I guess, do some X-rays. I forgot what it's
Scan,
called.
the CT scan.
Yeah, see, I can't even handle that. And so when I get when I get prescribed a real strong medicine, I'll just have to see if I can just handle, if I can just tolerate some pain, unless just the intensity is so bad, I'll just rather take some medicine and go to sleep.
Mm,
And so I can understand what that child is thinking about. To It's almost like I'd rather be wild and aware than put in a place that just makes me feel real vulnerable.
right. Yeah. So that's what we run into. It either works really well or the kid just does not like the way it's making them feel. Have we done this one? Yep.
Yeah.
Next. Right. All right. So just a quick video talking about um I think this one is about the self-medicating.
There are lots of people with bipolar disorder who self-medicate.
Okay.
They use marijuana or alcohol or other substances, and maybe not even in excess to deal with, but they use them to deal with the symptoms. A good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, definitely a bad thing, though I can understand it. I drank, before my diagnosis, I drank every night sometimes. I was miserable. And even when the alcohol, which is depressant, made me cry, I would drink some more. And so it's very normal. Up to 40% of people with bipolar disorder have a dual diagnosis. Now that means a drug and alcohol problem. But many of us with the illness, especially if we're newly diagnosed, say, oh, that pot, it calms me down. It helps with my medication side effects. It takes the edge off of the mania. People will use alcohol for the same reason. I can't sleep at night. I'm just going to have some whiskey. I'm going to take care of it this way. The problem is, and it's a big one, alcohol and pot do not even come close to helping the symptoms of bipolar disorder. They exacerbate them mainly because they disrupt sleep. And sleep is the most important tool you have outside of medications for regulating your moods because of your circadian rhythm and the way your body works. If you stay up all night drinking and smoking pot, you are going to be sick the next day. So if you're smoking pot or using alcohol to treat bipolar disorder, you're doing a disservice to yourself because it's going to make the illness worse. I understand the desire with all of my heart, but that's one thing if you can get help for, is deal with the fact that drugs and alcohol are not making you better. If you want to continue to smoke and drink, at least know that what you're doing is harming your illness. It's definitely harming your body. But if you want to get better, then you have to stop drugs and alcohol so that you can sleep normally and you can get the illness treated correctly and you're not interfering with your medications.
And he says that, stop, just stop. But once you get started, once you have an addiction, then you really can't just stop. So it would be nice to be able to just say, I know this isn't good for me, so I'm gonna just stop doing it. But those cravings, now your body is used to having those drugs, used to functioning under, drug use. And so that's where people start getting into trouble with in and out of places like rehabilitation, trying to get help. But then, you can't get the help because now you're addicted.
Right.
So, any other comments on that video before we move on?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a catch 22, and I think you have to have. That's why I just wish that even people that struggle, just with life, will still develop a discipline to kind of go in places to where even though you're not right, at least you're hearing the right things. And so, and I even think about, our church. There's so many ministries, and particularly what we're talking about now, mental health ministry, to where I wish we could just make it just comfortable. But you still got to, preach and teach things that say, hey, you got to change. But I wish there was some kind of way that people could feel comfortable to where even though I'm struggling, I just want to at least hear the information. I was talking to this guy yesterday on the prayer walk, and he was just talking about how different his life is now without his addiction. I mean, he was saying he was so deep into it. He was like he could spot a little piece of crack that was laying on the road on the other side of the street because he was so deep into the addiction. And and people in the catch-22, it's like I'm in this place, I really don't like it, and I don't want to be around anybody. And so the encouragement that you need to be able to hear a different voice, your natural reaction is saying, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be this right here. And people really need a place to where even when they're dealing with the addiction and trying to fight through it, they're comfortable enough to still go in places that might be telling a different story. But I know that's hard because, like when she said, just stop.
Yeah.
Ain't no way in the world that when you're
Yeah,
addicted
no.
to something, you can just stop. It has to be some type of life-changing revelation or something that
Right.
that can help you get to that place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So substance use and addiction can also contribute to mental illnesses. So substance use can lead to changes in some of the same brain areas that are disrupted in other mental disorders, such as schizophrenia, anxiety, mood, or impulse control disorders. So drug use that precedes or comes first of the symptoms of a mental illness may produce changes in the brain, and that actually, like, so we can say, okay, I have this mental illness and so I'm using drugs to try to self-medicate. But also, if you're using drugs, things in your brain can change, and your brain structure and function starts to develop mental illness. So so one can cause the other, and one can cause, like, mental illness can be caused from substance abuse, and substance abuse can cause mental illness. So those are two different ways that can affect you. Okay, so some different types of treatment for these comorbidities. Patients with comorbid disorders demonstrate poor treatment adherence and higher rates of treatment dropout than those without mental illness. Um, and they have negative effects and outcomes. So what happens is they're not dealing with just one thing. Now I gotta, concentrate on this mental illness, and I'm also using drugs. And so now I'm trying to stop both of these things. So it's already hard enough to try to stop one thing. So having those two things together just makes it harder. And then, nevertheless, steady progress is being made through research with new and existing treatment options for this comorbidity. Research is on implementation of appropriate screenings and treatments with a variety of settings. They also use this in the criminal justice systems, the ones who are actually taking care of their people. We talked about criminal justice and criminalizing mental illness. So they're trying to infuse that in the criminal justice system as well. And then it can also increase access to appropriate treatment for these comorbid disorders.
Yeah, that's a real tough piece right there. This is a different guy that I was talking to yesterday on the prayer walk, but he just came up to me and asked for prayer because he says in 2 weeks he might have to go back to jail, and it's real obvious that he's got a mental health problem, but apparently he's doing something criminal, and in jail, I really doubt that when he comes out, that he probably would have received a treatment that he needed for the mental health piece, and and so with people, and this guy, I think he looks a lot older than me, but he might be my age,
Yep.
but it's it's um it's 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 one of those cycles to where you know it makes it seem like people just stuck in that until until a miracle happens, because you can't let them do whatever the crimes are they're doing, but the system that we got to set it now, and I guess based on where you live, because you know I think over here, in Alachua County, I see a system that's more apt to law enforcement partnering with people that are in the mental health profession, as opposed to when I was in St. Johns County, and it was basically like you just gonna get punished. We ain't
Right.
concerned about the mental health unless you some little white kid, that we can
Right.
that we can get in a program, and
Right.
and so it's a real it's a place that you just I guess you just really got to pray, and
Yeah.
that people can get the proper treatment, because society is not necessarily based on who you are, not necessarily interested in offering a treatment that can help you get beyond that situation. People make mortgage payments off of people's mental health struggles. In prisons, that's how they pay their mortgages.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So that's like a whole nother something you throw in. You have, substance abuse, you have mental illness issues, and now you also are doing criminal activities. And a lot of times people have to do criminal activity to keep up with that substance abuse because they don't have $100, $200 a day to keep up with whatever they're taking, whatever they need. Alcohol might be a little bit cheaper. The vapes might be a little bit cheaper. Marijuana might be a little bit cheaper. But if you're using these prescription drugs, if you're using cocaine, if you're using, other drugs that cost money, I watch the shows and these people are like, yeah, I use about $100, $200 a day. And they're like, where are you getting this money from? You don't work, all you do is sit around and get high. And so now they're having to steal from people. They go to a lot of them go to the family's houses, take jewelry, take things, sell things. That's how they get money. The women talked about how they will use prostitution to get money. So then, like, that's a whole nother set of problems that come along. So it's definitely something that just kind of spirals out of control if you don't, stop and get it under control, and really work on getting into a program and being rehabilitated, which is going to be like a lifelong thing that you're going to have to do for the rest of forever, because it's not going to be something that you can say, oh, I'm better. I don't have to worry about alcohol anymore. I don't have to worry about drugs anymore. I don't have to worry about this. A therapist, somebody that is going to have to help them throughout the rest of their life to cope with those issues. Okay, so treatment of comorbidity often involves collaboration between clinical providers and organizations, like you said, the police and then the mental health, um, providing supportive services to address issues. When we talked about criminalization of mental health, we talked about the homelessness, getting other services involved, physical help, vocational skills, legal help. All those different types of things have to come into play in order to make sure that everything is being touched, because you can't just say, oh well, you're just going to get talk therapy and see if that helps. That's not going to help. If you're homeless, you're still going back out to the streets. You're still out there with whatever issues that you have. So they try to make it where it's a wraparound service where people can get all types of different help when they're dealing with comorbid issues. And then communication Communication is critical for supporting the services. Strategies to facilitate effective communication may include co-location, shared treatment plans and records, case review meetings, and then support and incentives for collaboration may be needed. And then you just have to, make sure you're showing up to these things. You get these things scheduled. Are you making your appointments? Are you meeting with these people? Are you doing what you need to do in order to get into housing, in order to get on the list for housing, in order to get vocational skills so you can get a job, so you're not just out on the street without a job. So all these different things they're trying to put into different type of rehabilitation processes so that the whole um, person can be addressed instead of just one thing here and one thing there.
I wonder if these support things, if these are things that makes the community feel like there's accomplishment, or the actual person. Because I see, I mean, and everybody's situation is different, but it's a lot of people that I see. Sometimes we'll take the grands and get a whole bunch of little, different things, little travel packs and things like that, and take them over and hand them out over there across from at that park across from St. Francis House.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that are over there, even though it looks like a bad situation, it really seemed like they found a community. I mean, everybody got their tents, and I know I know it gets cold sometimes and things like that, but it seems like they're like in the midst of a community of people that, you can't really judge them because you just, your tent next to mine, and
Right.
and then when you start talking about having to get up and go to a job every day and pay bills and all this kind of stuff, you know, um, I wonder if the idea of teaching skills does that make us feel better, or
Right.
I mean, is this something that many people that are in that situation really even desire to have those responsibilities? And so if that's not even a desire, you know, um, it's. I mean, I don't have no answers, but just in seeing some people, I went to turn down that road right next to St. Francis House. It's cleared out now, but you couldn't even turn down the road because all the tents were just everywhere, even in the road. And then
Mm.
and then when I go over there and hand out stuff, it's just like they don't look sad at all.
Right.
They got a community of folk that, and then they don't have any responsibilities, and so we're not judging. But I'm wondering if we want them to have to live like us, or if they even desire that. And is there something wrong with them if they don't desire to be like me with a mortgage and having to show up to work in the morning and leave in the evening? Um, I don't know. It's not an easy fix.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the person because if you don't want, like if you feel comfortable with, I don't have to get up and go to work, I can just live in a tent, people bring me stuff and that's where you're content and that's where you're comfortable, you know, the community health wants to be able to, give you all these services and have all these services available. But like you said, if that's where they feel comfortable, they have they've made friends, they have their own little community, that might be where that's where they want to be. They don't want to have, like you said, getting up, going to work every day, having to pay rent, having to do a mortgage. So yeah, that's
And then
a
and
that
then
that's an interesting.
to deal with the uncomfortable situation, then that's where the other stuff might come in to cope with the cold, to cope with the mosquito bites, to cope with all the other stuff that I have to deal with, and then not even, and then what if they have diabetes or something, to cope with the difficulty of living out here, even though I choose to not take on those responsibilities, but it's still difficult, even though it's my community, and I would prefer it, but I still need some coping stuff, some alcohol, some drugs, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a cycle.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I think, did we go through this one? Yep. All right, so this last video, it was just young lady. She was very candid. She talked about her struggles. She talked about, you know, why she first started using alcohol. And so I thought it was a good thing for us to kind of watch and hear it firsthand from someone living with mental illness in a substance abuse situation.
My name is Rosalind Evans. I was born in 1959 and I was born in Los Angeles, California. My mom married my stepdad and it was a lot of turmoil because it was such an abusive home living with my stepfather. I would go to school and I would think, dang, what if I call and my mom's dead? You know, in my mind, I'm always thinking he's gonna kill her. One day he's gonna hit her, he's gonna kill her. And I wasn't able to really concentrate in school or anything. I was told I was a problem child. When I was 12, my mom had me admitted into mental health, inpatient, because I tried to slash my wrist in a restroom because the fighting was going on in the house. I was told I was bipolar. I really didn't understand what it was meant. My mom didn't really follow up on it. My people didn't believe in that. They didn't believe in this mental illness stuff. I'd get the medicine, throw it away, go back with my normal life, and then I found alcohol. That became my medicine. It started off as fun because I could get up and dance and I could fit in a crowd, and you know, but it slowly turned into nightmares. It's a bad combination, bipolar, alcoholism. I am a miracle. I am lucky to be alive because when I don't take my meds and when I drink, I can wind up anywhere. I can wind up in anybody's house, you know. I have put myself in very dangerous situations. When you're homeless and you don't have anywhere to live and you're mentally ill and it's hard to find proper treatment. I felt like a person, just a piece of trash just being thrown away and kicked out of hospitals. They give you some medication and you're sent on your way with nowhere to go, nobody to turn to that understands you. The breakthrough for me was when I got housing.
I work for Riverside University Health System Behavioral Health, and the program I work for is called HOPE. And HOPE's goal and mission and vision is to support those who are living on the streets and help them get from the street into housing, connect them with services, and to help them get self-sufficient.
So they're going to give you a prescription and we're going to take it to the pharmacy?
Right, yeah. Okay. I was assigned a case manager, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a substance abuse counselor, a team that came together to give me support. And I didn't have that for years.
There's a whole continuum of care that's happening. I've known Rosalind about a year now. I'm her peer support specialist. I'm also her case manager on site at her apartment complex. There is transparency between myself and the rest of the treatment team, and if I recognize that there's an issue or a concern about what Rosalind is going through one day, I will immediately reach out and let them know that she needs some further support.
And there are people that stomp on you and they want, you've been busted in the head, you've been raped, you this. Those are the kind of things that could put you down to make you say, what am I trying to do? Nothing, you know, what am I trying to prove? I've been this way all these years, I might as well stay this way. When I relapsed emotionally, I will stop taking my medicine. And once I stop taking my medicine, then comes the drink. Forget the medicine, it's all alcohol. My mom is dead. I don't have any brothers and sisters. I'm an only child. My children are all in another state. I did not raise them. So my caregiver steps in and encourages me. Rosalind, did you take your medicine today? When I get on those lows, Rosalind, you know you have a doctor's appointment. It's important that you see the doctor. That's played an important role in my life.
Relapse is part of recovery sometimes. But it has to be looked at as more of a bump in the road. It's very important to have continuity. There needs to be a confidence on her side that there will still be that support that she needs. And I think that that's vital, that there's a safety net for her, and she doesn't have to go back to the streets no matter what. And I see Rosalind, that she's like the picture of the recovery model, because she just picks up and keeps going. And that gives me hope.
I have made a lot of mistakes, but thank God I'm not a mistake. I want my children to know that I love them very, very dearly. And I believe that they're at the age now that they understand that their mom is dual diagnosed with a mental illness as well as an addiction of alcohol. My diagnosis is bipolar disorder. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. I'm not in denial anymore, and it's led me to where I'm at now. It's a lifelong thing. It's not something you get your medicine and okay, I don't need to see you no more. For my life, I will stay in treatment.
All right, so yeah, so she talked about a lot of the different things that we spoke about. I think it just depends on your personality and you as a person. Once you get yourself into a situation where you have a mental illness, and sometimes, you know, that's something you can't control. It comes on however it comes on, whether it's through genetics, whether it's through, you know, whatever um, source. But then you also, once you get that addiction on top of it, you as a person have to say, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to live in the tent. I don't want to be, you know, out here with nothing, you know, no possessions and just, you know, doing whatever. So you really have to have that drive to want to do better, to want to take the services, to want to do what you need to do in order to, you know, better your life. Any
Yeah,
comments on the video?
yeah. I was quiet because I was tweeting this out right here when she said I've made a lot of mistakes, but thank God I'm not a mistake. I like that
Yep.
whole. I like that right there. I
Yep.
just I just posted that right there.
And she just has a lot of self-awareness. Like, you have to be able to say, okay, this is why this happened. You know, she had issues in her home life when she was a child. So that goes back to that adolescent checklist, that these things happen in your life that could cause mental illness, that could cause issues as you're growing older. And so, you know, that's how she got into the alcoholism. So then she's putting herself into risky situations. So it just depends on you as a person. She didn't want to be out in the streets anymore, so she took advantage of what was available to her. But then, like you say, you see people, you go, you know, give out bags and things to them, and they seem content to where they are. So I think it just really depends on, you know, individual people, what they want out of life, you know, what they don't want out of life, and that's how it'll be, like, things will be approached, whether they have to stay with that mentality, that type of lifestyle, or they're ready to work their way through it.
And that's why you can't ever allow yourself to be hardened to the place to where it's like, hey, they doing this, they making these choices, and when you go help them, you just throwing away money or throwing away resources. I think you got to always have a heart, and be led by God to provide, because it might be that one person out there that when you came and what you offered might be the breakthrough, that they needed to get out of that situation. And so even though you might have 95% of the people out there that were content, but you had one that was out there that was just trying to survive, and whatever it was that you offered. And so I think you still got to be led by God in everything that you offer, but I don't think you should ever let your heart get so hard to where you're just like, hey, it's their choice, and I'm not going to enable them by taking them soap or taking them lotion or taking socks or underwear or something like that. I think you can't let your heart get hard like that. You got to always be open to hear from God, because they might, when they see you, that might be the breakthrough that they needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other comments on what we've said here? No, well, that's all I have, Pastor.
All right, we want to thank everybody for joining in. If you think that there's somebody uh, that sees your feed on social media, you should share it with them. Or somebody, you can go to YouTube and pull it up, and you can email it to somebody. If there's somebody that that you know with, that are kind of dealing with some stuff, they might have an official diagnosis or not, but you see some of these tendencies that we saw in this right here, to where they just might be coping with the hardships of life. Um, Share it with them, and maybe open an opportunity that you don't have to have all the answers, but I think you just need to be able to access the resources. Somebody gave me this thing today, and so I'm going to make sure it's called Alachua County Street Card. And basically, what it does, all these different resources that are in our county, it just shares a whole bunch of different resources, and and you might not know everything, but we can educate ourselves enough to know what the resources are. I can't help you, but I can tell you who can probably help you. So let's have a little more love towards our brothers and sisters that sometimes might aggravate us, especially when it's a family member, and see if we can equip ourselves with the resources to offer some relief.
Absolutely.
But other than that, our Real Talk Bible study is in house tomorrow night, so we have Real Talk Bible study and dinner. And naturally, we'll always offer it virtually, but we'll be in house tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We're packing the bags for our food to give away on Friday at 9, and then on Saturday at 9, we're being a blessing to our community by giving away a couple weeks worth of grocery to make it until the end of the month. And then on Sunday, it's rep what you rep. And so whatever your profession, organization, team, school, whatever, come to church and rep what you rep. Give our kids the opportunity to see what the adults are involved in, and also let them rep whatever they rep, their school colors or whatever. And so worship service starts at 10:45. But God bless you, and have a blessed one. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Good night. Thanks for coming in.